Hey guys, welcome to my channel again. In this video, we're going to discuss rational exponents and square roots. And this is actually quite fun, I think. You do have to think a lot when it comes to finding the nth root of a number sometimes, especially if you are not allowed to use a calculator. However, I think the concept is quite easy to understand. And here I have written a summary of everything that you need in order to be successful for the next problems that we're going to see. So I recommend that you stop the video right now and you write this down, because you can always reference this list back whenever you're trying to solve a problem. So let's see, it says let n be an integer greater than 1 and let a be a real number a real number. That means that n could be positive or negative and a could be any number that you want. And here we have a few rules. The first rule says that if n is odd, that means 3, 5, 7, 9, those numbers, then a has one real nth root. So then a has one real nth root. Here's the second point. So if n is even, that means 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on, and a is greater than 0, notice this rule. This is actually quite important. A being greater than 0, that means that a has to be positive. Then a, which is the radicand, and we'll learn that in a little bit, will have two real solutions. You are going to have one positive solution and the other one is going to be negative. Third one, if n is even and a is equal to 0, then a has one real nth root. That just means that if you are trying to find the nth root of 0, that will always be 0. And the last one, it says if n is even, so my index, n is called the index. If my index is even, that means 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on, and a is less than 0, that means that a is negative, then I will have no real nth roots. And this is true for algebra 1. Once you get to algebra 2, and I will make a video about this later on, you will find that the square root of -1, in math we say that it doesn't exist, we say that that is I. The square root of -1 is I. So if you're trying to find the square root of a -4, that is just equal to the -1 times 4, which is also equal to the square root of -1 times the square root of 4, and that will just give you 2i. I know I did this very quickly. This is not the purpose of the video, but I just wanted you to give you a heads up for when you're trying to find the square roots of a negative number. Well, with that being said, let's look at three problems. And make sure that you're always referencing back to this list, and that is what I'm going to be doing. Last thing, remember that n is what we call the index. That is if this number outside of the square root, and a, the number inside the square root, is called the radicand. So let's look at these three examples. Here are three examples. In the first example, I have n equals 3. That means that the index is 3. I'm trying to find the cube root of -27. Now notice that if n is odd, let's see which one is it. If n is odd, then a has one real nth root. So what I'm trying to find is, and what I need to think of is, which number, when I multiply by itself 3 times, gives me -27. If you thought of -3 being that number, you are correct. And I can prove that to you very quickly. Negative 3 times negative 3, that is 9. And 9 times negative 3 is equal to negative 27. So 3 is negative 3, I'm sorry. Negative 3 is the cube root of negative 27. Let's look at this other number, this other example. N is 4, that means that the index is 4 and the radicand, the number inside the square root, is 16. So I'm trying to find the fourth root of 16. So in this case, I'm thinking of a number that when I multiply by itself 4 times gives me 16. So let's think. Let's start with 1. So 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. Well, that just gives me 1. That's not going to work. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Will that work? Well, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. So the answer is 2. But if you reference this sheet, this list, we have this rule that it says if n is even, I'm sorry, not this one, this one over here, that it says if n is even, right, in this case, n is positive 4, and the value of a, which is 16, is greater than 0, is positive, then we have two real nth roots. So what other number can we multiply by itself 4 times? That will give us 16. Well, that number will be negative 2. It will be the opposite of positive 2, which is negative 2. And we write it as plus or minus 2. That means positive 2 and negative 2. Let me do one last example. This one is actually quite easy. The nth root, well, in this case I'm trying to find the square root of negative 25. The square root of negative 25. Let me see if I can get that closer. Yeah, that moved a lot. Okay, there you go. The square root of negative 25. Well, let's think of a number that when we multiply by itself 2 times gives us negative 25. Is 5 going to work? Well, 5 times 5 is positive 25. I'm actually looking for a negative 25. People tend to think that if I multiply negative 5 times negative 5, that will give me negative 25, but that's also incorrect. It's actually positive 25. A negative times a negative is equal to a positive. So again, I'm going to reference this back. It says that if n is even and a is a negative number, then a has no real nth roots. Therefore, for the purpose of this video, we're going to say that the square root of negative 25 will be a no real solution. That's my video. That's the video for today. If you have not subscribed, I will ask you that you do that now if you are enjoying these videos.